Hello, welcome to the Omnivorous Bookworm. My name is Lauren, and in today's video I wanted to do a quick review of Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. So this book, I was the first time that I have read it for Jane Austen July. Well, I read it for Jane Austen July. It was the first time I read it ever. And it was really interesting because I knew going in that this book doesn't get as much love as some of Jane Austen's other novels, and that it had some connections to the Mysteries of Udolpho. So I previously read the Mysteries of Udolpho, and I did a review of that book, which I will link down below, and then I did Northanger Abbey. So that's sort of my um, perspective coming in. So it was really interesting. So this book was probably one of the first books written by Jane Austen, but we don't know exactly when. We do know that she sold the copyright for it, I believe, in 1803. And The Mysteries of Udolpho was written in 1794. So it makes sense that she would have written it in the early 1800s, but it wasn't actually published until 1817, after Jane Austen's death, when her brother was able to get the copyright from it. She tried to get the copyright before that because she wanted to publish it, because the publishers were just sitting on the copyright basically, and they wouldn't do it. So we do know that she wrote the book pretty early on, and that she did do some editing of it, probably around 1815, 1816. And then when, unfortunately, she died, the book was published in 1817 after her death. So the novel is pretty humorous. I would say it's one of the more outspokenly humorous of Jane Austen's books that I have read. Um, the plot itself is a little bit simpler, and I would say that the main draw for this book is actually not the romance, although I did enjoy that part of it. So basically we follow Catherine Morland. She's a 17-year-old girl who Jane Austen explicitly tells us is basically completely normal. She's not that interesting, she's not that dumb, she's not that smart, she's just like very middle of the road. And she's the daughter of a clergyman, and she gets the opportunity to travel to Bath with the Allens, who are quite wealthy. And then once in Bath, she meets Isabel Thorpe and her brother, who is quite taken with Catherine, partially because he believes that she will inherit the fortune of the Allens, even though she will not. And then she also meets the Tilneys, who are another brother and sister that we have. So we have Eleanor Tilney and then her brother. And she's able to go to their house with them, which is Northanger Abbey. And she has read The Mysteries of Udolpho. She's really into Anne Radcliffe. And so she starts perceiving all these very sort of normal things that are happening to her through the lens of this very mysterious, very dramatic, over-the-top book. So she starts perceiving that, for example, the Tilneys' mother died many years before, and she starts suspecting that maybe their father had something to do with it, and he's a very harsh person, and there ends up being some drama there. But I found it really funny, really witty. I really enjoyed Jane Austen's wit throughout the book. She really inserts herself. There's a lot of authorial voice where she talks about novels and which novels are good, which novels are bad, but that you really get the sense that she was not happy with authors like Anne Radcliffe, because she felt like they sort of gave novel writers a bad rap, that everybody thought that novels were like Gothic novels and were very over the top. But she also sort of acknowledges that reading novels at that time was sort of seen as, I would sort of equate it to how we might see like watching soap operas today, or some people are embarrassed to read, for example, like romance novels, that they think that they are too salacious. And at that time some people would have seen like all novels in sort of that genre sort of like a waste of time. But obviously we don't think that today. Definitely Jane Austen didn't believe that. And I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the Catherine is just so naive, but I can see why people might not always enjoy her, but I think it helps that she's 17. If she'd been older, I think definitely she would have been a much more difficult character to get with. But she's so young, and the whole time I was reading it, um, it just really reminded me of those, especially Catherine's relationship with Isabel Thorpe, who's very um, she's the one that she meets in Bath before she goes with the Tilneys, and she's very superficial. She's very melodramatic, very manipulative, but they get this really intense, really quick bond together, and they're suddenly best friends. And it just, obviously it's different, but it just reminded me of that sort of like teenage girl dynamic, that when you have these teenage girls that will just form this very like deep bond over sort of very superficial things sometimes, and they can get, angry just as quickly as they became friends. So that whole teenage thing, it just reminded me of like why it's good that teenagers are not courting for marriage anymore. They're just so immature throughout the whole book, all these teenagers. um, so I really enjoyed that dynamic of the friendship. I really felt like Catherine was just very funny. The way that she was perceiving everything, I don't know, I could kind of relate to that. It's like when you see a movie or you read a book and you get so into it that you start sort of feeling like you're part of it. Maybe that was just me, but I really related to that part. Having read The Mysteries of Udolpho, I don't know that it gave me much more of an insight. Of course, when she refers to certain characters or she refers to um, plot points of the book, I feel like that was helpful. My recommendation, if you want to get sort of a sense of Northanger Abbey and the satirization of Gothic literature, if I had to do it over again, I probably would have read The Italian by Anne Radcliffe instead of The Mysteries of Udolpho, because it's much shorter and I've heard other people enjoy it more. So I think if that's something that you are wanting to do, that would be my recommendation, because The Mysteries of Udolpho is quite long and I don't feel like it gives you that much of a sense as far as that book. But I think reading some sort of Gothic literature that was popular at that time does add a lot when you're reading the book. Like, it does sort of give you that sort of behind the scenes that a lot of people who would have been reading Northanger Abbey would have already had that, at least that idea. If they hadn't read that Gothic literature, they would have been familiar with it. So that would be my recommendation if you're searching for, like, to get that sort of deeper level of understanding of reading Northanger Abbey. The other thing that I thought was really interesting about the book is that this is somewhat of a spoiler, but I don't really think so. Uh, when Catherine ends up with her love interest, the the author very explicitly tells us that the reason that he likes Catherine is because Catherine liked him, and that he hadn't really seen her as anything until he found out that she liked him. And I just found that super interesting, and I really enjoyed that Jane Austen really kind of turned that on its head. And you really will seldom see that in literature of this time, that the woman is the one at least emotionally pursuing the man, because obviously socially she couldn't like outwardly do that. But I really liked that, and I just liked how everything was very sort of like, it's very normal, which is part of why it's funny or why it's interesting, because in Catherine's head everything is completely over the top, just like the Gothic novels. The other thing that I really found interesting was that there is a part of the story that if Catherine was not, even if she was not imagining this very over the top scenario, it is quite dramatic, especially for that time. And the Tilney's father does something that is, would have been very scandalous. A lot of people would have been upset about it. Her family is rightly upset about it. and probably should have been more upset about it. Even in today's age, I feel like as a parent, you would be upset if somebody did that to your child. But because her imagination is so over the top that it almost makes this other thing seem sort of more commonplace than it would have been otherwise, if that makes sense. So I think that's another interesting thing that Jane Austen is sort of showing us, that if these Gothic novels are just so completely, at least the ones by Anne Radcliffe, so completely out of, reality, that it actually makes, actual drama in reality seem small by comparison when it really shouldn't. And I don't know. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was funny. I thought it was well done. I feel like I enjoyed it more than a lot of other people do who read Northanger Abbey. And it doesn't take away from any of other Jane Austen's other books, but I think if you go into it knowing that it is very different, it's not as much about the romance, although that's there. It's more sort of the satirization, and it's pretty funny. Like, I found it pretty funny, but obviously that's going to be a matter of taste as well. So that is my review for Northanger Abbey. Let me know down below if you've read it, what you thought about it, what is your take on why Northanger Abbey doesn't get as much love as some of her other books, and if you agree or disagree with that. So thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe because I'm a new channel, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.